Hello, Stuart Burnside.
Hello, Paul.
So, where do we start? I think before we get you to introduce yourself, because nobody knows who you are, I want to start with the watch. Can you just put the watch on the table?
Do we have to?
Yeah.
Can't believe you're making me do this.
So let's talk about the watch, right? It's a lot of cash,
No, not
a
that
ton
much.
of cash, like bucket loads of cash. What are you getting from it? Oh, okay. What are you getting
Perfect.
from it? What are you getting from it?
Metrics and data.
Metrics and data. Right, okay. Metrics and data from the watch.
Yep.
You had a watch already, Stuart.
Yeah, I did.
What was wrong with the watch? Did it stop working?
No, it was just time for an upgrade. Why'd you buy a new car?
Good point. I don't know. Many reasons, right?
Yeah.
Many reasons. Right, let's get you introduced properly. Stuart Burnside, tell the audience who you are, what you do, where you're from.
So my name's Stuart. I'm from Edinburgh originally. I've lived here all my life for almost 37 years now. I'm a personal trainer based just in Musselburgh, just in East Lothian. And I've been doing that pretty much since I left school. I kind of fell into it. I don't think I ever set out to work in the fitness industry. I was always very active when I was young, and yeah, like I say, I think I just stumbled upon it. Probably didn't push myself academically at school.
Yeah.
I was always probably just messing around, having a laugh. Yeah, and then I went to college after that. Again, enrolled on a sports coaching course, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Just wasn't what I expected. Again, didn't last very long there.
Huh.
3 months probably, and then probably spent the next 3 or 4 years still living a student life.
So the sports side is what you do as your vocation. It's your job now. Do you think you went into that because you were passionate about it, or do you think that you just kind of fell into it and it's where you ended up being?
Probably a bit of both.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I was passionate about it, but I didn't ever take it that seriously that I'd think I would have a career in it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yep.
I probably didn't know. Again, you're talking like 15 years ago now, in health and fitness in terms of a profession. The industry is massive now compared to what was back then.
Yep.
There's a lot more folk participating in sort of gym-based activity, all that sort of stuff. There's a lot more gyms, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe back then, a gym membership was like a luxury item for folk. There wasn't the sort of budget gym scene that folk had. So again, it wasn't something that really crossed my mind.
But expectations have gone up from the general public now, right?
Yeah, massively. I think, like I've said to you before, the benefits of exercise are pretty much undisputed in the literature.
Yeah.
And how it can help physical, mental health, all that sort of stuff. And I mean, there's so many more folk engaged in it now, which is it's a great thing.
Yeah. Do you see a direct link, jumping straight in then, do you see a direct link between physical health and mental health, i.e. correlation between those who look after themselves physically and their mental health versus those who don't or neglect it?
I think I can only speak from my personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think yes, there is. I know, like I say, through my experience, times where my activity levels have dropped off, where I've not been as active. So I do a lot of running. When I'm not engaged in running, or before when I was playing football, when I didn't do things like that, I did notice a difference. Yeah.
Dip a bit.
Yeah,
into it,
I think so. I mean, I think there's a whole discipline side to it. There's a purpose. There's all that sort of stuff. And when you don't have that, I definitely noticed a change. And I would say that a lot of people would agree. Obviously, there's a massive difference between the clinical side of mental health and the everyday side.
Huge. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think there's many people that would say that it's the other way. Do you know what I mean?
No.
It negatively impacts their mental health by exercising.
Yeah, and like physical health, like everyone's got mental health, right? But there's a stigma attached to it. If you start talking about mental health in the street, it's always like, oh, what's wrong with you, right?
Yeah.
If you talk about physical health that way, doesn't bat an eyelid, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, I mean, when you relate it to sort of physical health there, I mean, obviously there's severe health conditions, cancers, all that sort of stuff, and then there's your cold.
Yep.
You've got a cold, a bit of a runny nose. That's the sort of the way I look at it.
Yep. exactly. So in terms of physical health then, so you've been training people for a long time, been in the industry for a long time. There's a lot of folk that struggle to make the transition to physical activity. And I remember what it was like when I was really unfit, like really unfit. The last thing you want to do when you're in that situation is, well, a number of things, but first and foremost is do any of it, because it makes you out of breath. It's extremely hard. It's not something that you get a huge amount of pleasure from when you're in that condition. And then the worst of all is that you're surrounded by kind of media, TV, magazines, social media that are all portraying what is, let's face it, a completely unrealistic set of circumstances. So on one hand, they're holding up all these aspirational, artificial goals and saying, why don't you look like this? And on the other hand, you're in a position where anything dramatically more than taking a few steps is really, really hard. So how do you take somebody on the journey? Where do you begin?
It's a good question. It's a really good question. And I think it starts with the person and their expectations. And I think a big part of my job is managing folks' expectations. A lot of the time you'll deal with people who have unrealistic deadlines about what they want to achieve and what frame of
as in
time.
I'm going on holiday next week.
Yeah,
Can I?
Yeah, you'd be surprised, honestly.
Really?
I've got a wedding in 3 weeks. Like, what can I do? Left
Dear.
it a bit late.
Okay,
and then, yeah, I mean, it's like anything. You need to set yourself realistic targets.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do any physical activity, then setting yourself up to fail by saying I'm going to go 5 times a week to the gym, it's not achievable.
Yeah,
I would advise folk to look at what they can do rather than what they can't do. Something is better than nothing. If all you can manage is a 10-minute walk twice a week, do that.
Because it's something, spin it.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah,
and I think that, again, we talk about time frames, 4 weeks, 6, it's a lifetime you need to be doing this for.
Yeah.
It's something you need to integrate into your everyday life, whether that's going out on more walks with the kids to school, all that sort of stuff. It's how you do it that way. I think I've said to you before, I think there's a big social pressure for people to be in the gym doing intense exercise, and that's just not the case. It doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah.
There's so many avenues to go down for people, and again, it has to be something that you enjoy doing. If you think about maybe jobs you've had in the past that you really don't like, the last thing you want to do every day and get up is go to your job because you hate it.
Yeah.
And there's no point in me asking somebody to do something that they don't enjoy, because it's just going to be counterintuitive to the process. And
that's true, isn't it? Like, you can get physical activity in many different forms. It doesn't actually have to come from the gym. It can come from just a walk, right?
Absolutely.
Walk the dog, right? 10,
Absolutely.
15 minutes, right? And that's enough to keep you going and to just, keep all the systems working, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's very much a case of sort of building into it. You build your confidence as you do these things.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned there about at the start feeling really out of breath and stuff. You will feel uncomfortable at the start if you're doing exercise.
Yeah.
There's no getting away from it, but it's the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Yeah.
So things like walking and stuff. So just walking 10 minutes, maybe walk up a hill the next time. Ease yourself into it. You don't have to break world records when you're trying to just become healthier.
Do you get I'm intrigued, do you get more as a personal trainer? Do you get more from taking somebody on a journey which is similar to that, where exercise is somewhat alien to them, but you can see real changes in their life slowly happening because they're adopting different behaviors? Or do you get more feedback and reward from taking somebody who has got a PB in a marathon to knocking 10 minutes off a marathon time, right? Because you've contributed to that. What's the more rewarding for you?
It's a good question. I don't think either, to be honest. I think I would get equal measures of satisfaction from both of them.
Because they're different journeys,
because
right?
They're different journeys completely. A client I had recently, she came to the gym. She wasn't very confident. So I'm big on how it translates to your everyday life.
Yeah.
How does it make you better every day? And she told me that she was so happy that she, in her back garden, it backs onto another back garden.
Yeah.
And her daughter and the daughter from over the fence used to chat to each other.
Yeah.
She was never able to lift her up so they could see each other.
Oh.
So she'd been training for about 3 or 4 months. Now she can easily lift her daughter up so she can speak to her friend.
That's
and
a big
she said
moment,
that
right?
meant a lot to her.
Yeah, a big
and
moment.
it was, that was really, really nice to hear.
Amazing.
Whereas, somebody who's more experienced at exercise and has more specific sports performance goals, if they hit a PB, it's amazing. It's a great feeling.
What's the biggest enemy for doing physical activity?
Social media.
Social media.
Well, maybe not. I mean, it's got
because of the pressure. You mean?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pressure, particularly on young people,
Yep.
to look a certain way,
Yep.
to dress a certain way. I mean, it undoubtedly has its benefits. There's a lot of great content out there. There's a lot of great, like you say, influencers out there that are
Yep.
putting out good content for folk to follow. But there's a lot of misinformation, like everything that you've noticed with things like the pandemic and stuff. There's so much misinformation.
Yeah.
And people are actually listening to that.
Yep.
And that makes it dangerous.
And in terms of, because I struggle with motivation, I struggle with time, and I think everyone can always make an excuse, right? There's always something else, like I don't have the time, but let's not say anything, but I'll sit and watch movies all night, or I'll watch sport all day and not do any myself, right? There's always an excuse, right? But is it better to kind of fit? Is it better to do a lot in one or two instances, or is it better to do a little but regularly? Like, so it's that whole kind of 5 times 2, or 2 times 5? What's better? Or actually, are they both beneficial? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends on your circumstances, of course. Like, everyone's different in that sense, but I would always lean towards doing more often, little.
Yep.
Just again, when it comes to the health side of things, like, yes, going to the gym and stuff is great, but what do you do outside of that, the time when you're not at the gym? Are we spending a lot of time sedentary, sitting about?
Yeah.
Whereas if you only go a couple of times, if you went twice a week, it might be, if you go, say, a Thursday and you don't go again until a Tuesday, that's sort of 5 days where you're not really doing an awful lot.
Yeah.
So I would always aim to go for shorter sessions, but more frequently.
Okay.
But again, playing
different.
Devil's advocate, that might not be manageable for people. So that's how everyone's different, and it's hard to give sort of blanket advice. But
in terms of accountability, right? So I was guilty of this myself for a long time, but I always wanted somebody to give me what I wanted. So I'll bring that to life a little bit, right? And there's many areas of life that would translate to, right? But if I wanted a PB, I would come and speak to a personal trainer, right? And I would say, how are you going to help me get the PB, right? But in my head, subconsciously or consciously, you're the answer. Not me, right? You're the answer. And I think my realization moment came, and there was loads of sound bites that we spoke about, right? You're laughing, but there was loads of sound bites.
Don't even want to think about it.
I realize it sounds so simple, right? But I realized that actually doing all the work, putting in the effort, was what was going to get me there. It wasn't that I had a personal trainer. It sounds stupid, right? You're laughing, but it's like, genuinely, I think people want that body, or want that PB, or want to achieve a certain goal, like lifting a child up over a fence, whatever their goal is, and it's meaningful for them. I think there's the wrong mindset around looking for somebody else or external things to give you that success.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it has to come from the person. They have to want to do it as well. And there is a lot of times I have people and they do what you've just said there. They think, right, because I've committed to getting a personal trainer, that's enough. But there is an element of responsibility on the person as well.
Are you clear on that when somebody comes to you, like, or do you have to kind of softly introduce it?
It's like everybody is so different, and it would be like at your work, if you're managing somebody, you have to manage people differently. Like, not every person's the same. Some folk are going to respond to you being a bit harsher and more direct to them, where other folk need that sort of arm around them. But I'd always try and be honest with them in terms of what they can achieve and in what time frames.
That's why I've got all the scars on my back, by the way, isn't it?
No comment. No, but I think that if you're honest with somebody, then an element of it comes down to them after that.
Yeah. What struck me as well is last year I was gunning for a PB in the marathon, and coincidentally it's marathon time on Sunday, so a couple of days away. Yep. And I'm approaching this one differently, but I'm really looking forward to it. I wanted to touch on my PB was all about breaking the 4-hour mark, right? And I was walking in going, I think I might have a chance of doing it. I'm really working hard. It's really tough, but I feel like it's just there within reach. And then I remember you saying to me, maybe a month or so before I was running that marathon, you were running 2, like with only a couple of weeks or so between them.
Yeah, about 3 weeks apart. That's
3 weeks apart. So you did
London and then Liverpool after that.
And I've applied to London about 18 times and never got in. Yeah. So
they must know.
They must know already. But you were gunning for a different PB, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which was?
I was trying for 3 hours. But again, running is what I've done for a long time. And it's something that, I do run a lot, but probably naturally not bad at it. Whereas there's other things that folk can do in the gym that I would have no chance of doing. So
I just couldn't get my head around that at the time, like an hour's difference, right?
Yeah.
An hour, right? You're not talking about minutes, you're talking about an hour over the same distance. I mean, that is enormous.
When you put it like that, I mean, what I had you doing and what I was doing they weren't a million miles apart. It was just different paces we were working at.
Yeah. And you're about 10 foot taller than me, so that helps.
Legs, so that helps.
And I also think that that's unfair on me, right? Because I have to do about 8.
Do more steps. Should get a watch.
Should get a watch, or we should recalibrate the times depending on how tall people are, right?
Like a handicap.
Yeah, basically. Why not? It works in golf, doesn't it?
Well, it does.
So on to stuff outside of exercise then. So I think one of the things that we've shared a little bit about is kind of parenthood. And I'm still relatively early on in that journey. As the listeners all know, my son is 7, my daughter is 4. And you've just started off on that journey yourself, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How has it been?
Yeah, it's been amazing. It's everything that people tell you it'll be and a bit more.
Yeah.
There's times where you're doing things like, this is much easier than folk said. And there's other times you're like, God, this is so much harder than folk said it was going to be.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just like everything. The first few months, you're sleepwalking your way through life, sort of.
Yeah.
And you're just trying to get by.
It's really hard, the sleep deprivation, I think, right?
It is. Especially going in.
It was tough for me.
Yeah, I mean, because from working in gyms and stuff, I do a lot of shift work till 10 and then maybe up early the next morning. So it wasn't completely alien to me getting maybe like 5 hours sleep, but it's constant. Do you know what I mean? It's like 5 and then 4 and then maybe a couple, and then you're dealing with all the other stresses that go with that as well. So
it's almost worse, right? You'd almost prefer an acute, like no hours, and then, just dealing with that, but it's over. But this, you're right, it's almost like water torture, isn't it? Because it's like a little bit less than you used to, again and again and again and again. It's compounded all the time.
Yeah, and you never know when the next good night's coming, do you? You're like, oh God.
No. And it always used to make me feel kind of fuzzy, almost back to the days when I was drinking tons. I always like fuzzy headed the next day, clearly, right?
Uh-huh. But it's very similar to
you're
that.
Not,
you
you're not
feel
thinking,
hungover.
Yeah,
right.
You do.
You're right.
But I think that the challenging times are when you don't get a lot back in those early days as well. I remember that, and I remember suddenly they start to give you even the smallest size signals back, like the smiles and the giggles, and
that's
it changes.
The stage we're at just now, and it's
everything.
You notice, it makes it all worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you touched on education.
Yep.
So you weren't very academically minded.
Yeah.
What did you do at school? Remind me.
Not an awful lot.
Really?
Yeah. I got a couple of hires and standard grades and that sort of stuff, but I never really applied myself, I don't think.
Were you?
I was always on the report card. Oh, he could do well if he just stopped talking and mucking about.
So they saw the potential, and you didn't believe it, or you couldn't be asked.
No, I think I just saw. I was speaking to somebody about this the other day. I just saw school as a place to go and hang about with your mates, play football at lunch and stuff. Like, it wasn't anything bad. I just didn't really listen that much.
So fast forward.
Yeah.
And you decided in later life.
Yeah, and about I think it was about 2017, 2018.
Yeah.
I started a degree in business management. So I work at a university. So I decided to give it a go while I was there.
What was do you mind me asking what the motivator was? Because like I struggle to, you go through education most of your kind of, informative years, and then you come out, you go into the real world. What makes you go, hold on, I might go back to that and do things differently? Was there a catalyst, like a?
I think there was a few things probably, yeah. I think it was to like prove to myself that I could do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's a good motivator, right? Yeah. Proving it to yourself. You weren't proving it to anyone else, right?
No. Obviously, my wife and I were talking about starting a family. I kind of felt that my experience of just working in a gym was maybe a bit one-dimensional in terms of career progression.
Okay, yeah.
I thought it would give me a bit more clout if I had a degree, basically. If I was applying for jobs.
Yeah.
That was probably the two main motivators in the decision.
And how was the journey been? It was 4 years, was it?
4 years, yeah.
And so did your belief in your own abilities, did that change as you from when you began to when you finished?
As I was going through it, you mean?
Yeah, like how did it, like, did you get more confident? Did you get less confident?
I think more confident as you go along.
Okay.
I mean, it was a long time out of any sort of education before.
Yeah.
I went back to, obviously I did my PT qualifications and stuff, and there's always courses like that, but in terms of like real academic study, where it was like an intense study, that was the first I'd done for maybe 10, 15 years. So I was probably a bit nervous going back into it, but the more you get into it, like we talked about the exercise, at the start it's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
But the more you get into it, I like the discipline it gave me as well, because I was working full time and I was studying full time. There wasn't really a minute to yourself. So you had to be regimented. You had to study at certain times. You had to make sure things were done, because if you missed the window, then that was it.
Huge admiration, by the way, for holding down a full-time job and doing a degree. I mean, that's something, right?
Yeah, it was tough. It was really tough at times. And I had great support from my wife and my employers as well.
Yeah.
But you couldn't have done it without that support. But it was tough and it was demanding.
And then towards the end of it, you thought, how am I going to make this a little bit more tricky? I know. Let's start a family.
I know, that was pure timing. That was pure timing.
Good stuff.
I mean, it did bring a whole dimension to the challenge, but then it gave you another reason. Do you know what I mean? It gave 100%. You that sort of impetus to keep going and get it done.
Cool. So all of that effort, all of that determination's gone into 4 years. Have you got a sense yet of where you've landed? It's not official, but do you feel like it should be a good result?
Yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed it will be.
Do you feel like you've put enough of your?
I think I've given it everything I could.
Nice.
I didn't leave.
That's all you can do, right?
Any stone unturned. So we'll see what happens. But I mean, just getting to the end of it, I think, is an achievement.
Absolutely.
Like I say, I probably didn't apply myself at school. So sitting here now, I'd be quite pleased just to get through it.
I'm coming back to the watch again. So this was your pat yourself on the back.
Yeah. I thought I needed a new one, so I thought I think this was a good reason to do it. I think.
Yeah, we've been joking about the watch, right?
Mm-hmm. But you tried to talk me out of it a couple of times.
I did, yeah. Only because I didn't want you having a better watch than me.
Materialistic and stuff.
It was materialistic. Yeah, materialistic. That's right. I did. That stuck. That stuck. But it's important to stop and pause and reflect, right? And sometimes you go through a period of your life and you don't have that pause and you go into another one. And so the lessons learned sometimes don't get learned because you don't just stop and pause. And absolutely. I think it's important to do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, it was a long time, and there was a lot of sacrifice, not just from me, but like I say, from my wife and stuff. So it wouldn't be fair not to reflect on that from her input. Do you know what I mean? There was times where she was doing the majority of the work in the house or elsewhere so that I could study. So it isn't, I always think about this when you see like professional athletes like in a single event, like a golfer or something like that, they go up and they win something. It's not just them that's up there that's done it. There's a whole team behind them. Yeah. And that's what I kind of feel like that this was for me. There was folk behind me supporting me that helped me achieve it. So I think it is important, like you say, to take that time out and just have a bit of calm again and enjoy other things that aren't as stressful.
100%. So what's have you allowed yourself to think about the what's next? Has it changed? There's two questions. Have you allowed yourself to think about the what's next, but also has it changed what you view as what's possible, or your aspirations, or are you changed from a mindset perspective, or actually are you far more grounded? You don't like to kind of look too far ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of both, to be honest. Obviously, we're having a new daughter and stuff like that. There's part of me that requires that stability.
Yeah.
But there's also that bit inside of me that wants to go and utilize what I've learned.
Yeah.
Because there's no point in doing these 4 years if you're not going to use it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do have aspirations of wanting to try other things, but at the same time, I do love working with people in the gym.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of caught between the two, because as my family grow up, I don't want to be in the gym till 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, training people, as much as I love it.
Yeah.
I want to be at home, spending time with them. So maybe something that gives me a bit more balance in terms of time.
People are the common thread throughout everything, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's, in whatever sector you work in, people are integral, they're important, they're vital to everything. And I think that's often forgotten. But having people skills, being able to work with people from different backgrounds, cultures, locations, different times in their own life journeys, I think gives a fundamental set of core skills to whatever you decide to do. And you did business, right? So,
business,
so actually, I'm assuming, but tell me otherwise, but I'm assuming that actually, those skills are prevalent, and you can choose where to apply what you've learned now in industry, right?
Yeah, to a degree I could, yeah. But like I said, like you have hit the nail on the head. I do like working with people.
Yeah.
I like interacting with people. That's a big thing for me. So maybe something that involves that would be good.
But no firm decisions.
No firm decisions. Open offers.
I like that. Yeah, we'll put the link in there. We'll put the link in the bit below. So I've got a really weird weekend. So I've got the marathon, not where you were going. No, I've got the marathon, and this weekend my football team are in real danger of losing their status as a Premier League club. And honestly, it's super stressful for me. Personal thing, super stressful for me.
Pessimistic Paul.
Pessimistic Paul. Pessimistic Paul. I'll not shake that off now. No. Pessimistic Paul. Your team is
Hearts,
and my team is Everton. So you've done far better this season than we have.
Yeah, that's fair to say.
Have you qualified?
I mean, yeah, we have, but it's like, with Scottish teams, because they're so bad in Europe, I think they start playing again at the end of June to qualify for Europe. One of those ones.
Okay,
maybe not quite that extreme, but
how has your relationship with football changed as you've got older and life's gone on? Were you kind of more fanatical when you were younger?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Yeah. Again, the last 4 years, I've not had the chance to do much outside of work and sort of studying. Yeah. So I haven't been as much as I'd like to. But when you go, you always get the passion back for it, don't you? When you go to a game, it's always brilliant. Yeah. And I have been at like a few times, but not as often. I used to have a season ticket when I was younger.
Oh, really?
For a good few years, but not anymore.
Not anymore. Is it something you're going to take your daughter to when she grows up?
I'd like to. Yeah, I'd like to.
It's
the same sort of thing that I did when I was growing up as well. So I'd like to do that.
Yeah, it means a lot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I took my son down to Goodison, and the only difference is, we're based up in Edinburgh, and it's a 4 hours ish drive down to Liverpool. It's it's tough. Right?
Must be a tough time for him going down there recently.
And I feel guilty, right? I mean, this is light-hearted chat, right? But I genuinely feel guilty that I shouldn't be putting him through it. He's been to 5 games and he's seen 1 win, and I think three losses and a draw. Why would I put him through it? I genuinely feel bad about it.
You want him to manage his expectations though, because you don't want to think they win all the time. Because
they used to when I was growing up.
This is all you keep saying. Back when I was a boy,
football started before the Premier League. So I also want to come back to social media. So like everything, I guess, there's a positive to it and there's a negative to it. Talk to me about social media and how you see it generally? Like, do you see it, are you skewed slightly towards the positive? Is it 60-40, or are you more, vociferous in your view? It's actually 70-30 negative,
Just in general.
General.
I don't know. I think it's a massive experiment that we'll probably look back on in like 20 years.
Who's running the experiment?
Well, that's it. Who is running it? I think we'll look back on it in like 20 years and be like, what is that all about?
Absolutely. Do you not think there's like, isn't it a kind of a window into giving democracy to people to have their views, to be independent, to almost rule by consensus on the platform? But the way I see that playing out, it's absolute car crash stuff in some cases, right?
I think it's absolutely mental. Like when you think about all the things that go on, and then what goes into what comes up on your newsfeed, like the algorithm, that what you see, there's so much that you don't see.
Yeah, and I think people don't even understand that, right? They just think that everyone's looking at the same stuff, right?
Yeah, that's it.
And it's not. It's curated for you as the.
Well, that's it. And then I think it's, in terms of general, I think it's a bit mental. And then when we go back to what we talked about in the fitness industry, I think it's even more crazy.
But that's in a bad way, or
I think so. But again, it's a catch-22 because there is so much good out there.
Yeah.
But it's how, when we talked all about the stuff at the start about how you integrate things into your exercise in your life, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
The fundamental behind it all is education.
Yeah.
You need to educate folk about why, the reasons for, the reasons against, all that sort of stuff. I don't think you get that from a social media post.
Yeah. Because there's no context, right? It's just a bang, like a hit. Yeah.
And it's all like clickbait, if you like, some of it. Unrealistic clickbait.
So lack of depth, basically.
I think so, yeah.
And that's why people, and again, I don't think it's maliciously conscious, but I think that's why people have lost, in my view, this is just my view, lost the ability to think for themselves. So if you're served a bit of information in whatever form that comes, that is often perceived as the truth. Doesn't matter who it comes from, doesn't matter what their opinions are, it's served on a screen, so it's carries some unwritten authority about it, and I think society buys it, right? They don't. I think what we need to start to learn, and what I'm definitely going to talk to my son and daughter about, is just questioning everything. And I don't mean in a negative way, as in question. I just mean just ask yourself all the time. It's a healthy thing to do, I think. Just ask yourself some of the bits around the context, and try and place it, because it's dangerous otherwise, right?
Yeah. What do you think they'll say when they come and say, "Dad, can I get a Facebook account, or can I get can I get a phone? Can I get this?"
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous. So I've worked in tech for 30 years, right? Yeah. And so I'm always talking about kind of innovative, leading tech. And I love that. That's my passion. And I'm not passionate about the technology. I'm passionate about the outcomes that it can provide to people and to society and to businesses. But it's like anything. Once you give that capability in any tool, in this case technology, once you give it to people, it's in the hands of the people to do good or bad with it, right? And so that's the challenge, I think. It's not the tools themselves that are necessarily the problem, but in some cases it is. But it's actually what do you do? It's the intelligence and, dare I say it, the common sense of the user. So I have this conversation quite a bit with my wife around what do we do, and I don't think you can shield them from it. In fact, I think that would be harmful.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Because then they'd be isolated, and it's part of the world whether you like it or not. So I think embrace it and just try and teach, again, away from the technology. Try and teach the context and the behaviours around it. What the dangers are, what to look out for.
The landscape might have changed in 3 years by the time they ask you. Do you know what I mean?
I genuinely think it's going to change in I think we're on timelines of kind of months now.
I read this book recently. It was called The Shallows.
Yeah.
I can't remember who the author.
Yeah.
But what they talked about was how it was social media was making folk less intelligent because they were, like you said before, just scrolling and just seeing things and just taking it as granted, saying like that's fact, and not actually reading into depth. Whereas hundreds of years ago, you would have to look into things, read numerous books to form an opinion, and and consider all the points and stuff. Whereas now folk are just scrolling through and saying, "Oh, yep," and that's how they're getting their knowledge.
This is a really fascinating subject, because I remember, I think I was on the tail end of it, which shows my age, right? But I remember the scientific calculators that came out, the big thing, right? And there were baked in functions on them and everything. And there was a huge debate around allowing pupils to bring those into exams, right? It was a massive, it was nationwide, and that played out the way it played out. And then the same debate played out when Google came along, right? So you just type in a question, Google gave you the answer, right? Really, is that healthy? Blah, blah, blah. Now we're having exactly the same debates again about OpenAPI, right? And ChatGTP. And I think I was in a room with a professor last week, and we were having this conversation. He thinks this is different level stuff, right? This we thought we had a challenge with the calculator, then we thought we had a bigger challenge with Google. This is just completely different stuff. This will dramatically change society, guaranteed. Yeah, and some of it will be good.
What was the sort of time frame he's thinking? Because it's in its infancy at the moment, so it's like.
It's in its infancy from a market perspective, right? But genuinely, I think it's already being adopted and utilized by those who understand its power. Right. Okay. And the reason it's being adopted and utilized is to get competitive advantage.
Right. Okay.
So what I see happening is you're going to get this gulf, and it will be a gulf between those who have adopted the technology and integrated it into their process or into the tools that they use as a business or as an individual to elevate themselves in their own position, and those who just stay away from it, still curious about how that's going to play out. Oh, I don't know about the dangers. Oh, I don't know. Those who embrace it, and they've already done it, by the way, are already honestly, I can't exaggerate enough how much of a competitive advantage this is. It is astronomical.
And do you think that's like at corporation level, or do you think it like trickles down into sort of societal level as well?
Trickles all the way down to societal level. So now you can integrate tools into ChatGTP that basically you tell the tool, here's the parameters, the tool goes and does it, right? So just think about, automating everything, right, with intelligence. I saw something online the other day, and the danger of doing podcasts, right? So I'm doing quite a lot of podcasts. So this stuff's going on social media. Imagine the sound bites from my voice that exist out there now, just having done, this is episode number 10, right? Yep. So the sound bites that exist, there was a tool out there, and there's many tools for it. You take the tool, you apply it to a lot of data from a single voice, so you can hear the ups and downs, then the tones, everything else, the way they speak, the pauses, everything. It learns, and it can literally then call somebody up exactly like I would. And it fooled, the bit that shocked me was it fooled this person's partner, and it fooled this person's work colleague. Wow. Right? This isn't sci-fi.
Yeah.
This is now today, right?
Yeah, that's scary.
That is super scary. So yeah, it's a really hard question to answer, because I think as long as you inform people as to what the dangers are, then I think that's all you can really do, because the tools are out there, and if you don't use them, you can use the tool in a meaningful way, right? So
do you think things like that, there'll be sort of mitigation that comes in against that, or do you think it's just going to keep driving away?
I think it will drive away in itself. The challenge is going to be, I think, different countries will apply different legislation to it, because they'll each perceive it as a different threat depending on their own culture. Yeah, and that differentiation of legislation will also then give competitive advantage to countries that have adopted it but maybe are managing it in a good way, versus those who have said it's not coming in here at all because of the dangers, right? But the gulf is going to be massive between people that have adopted it and those who don't, for sure. Scary, honestly. And and I've been in technology a long time, but it is genuinely a little bit scary. It's a bit Terminator job.
Yeah, that is quite scary.
Yeah. Okay, so let's end on how you have found the app, right? So you've been really supportive from the beginning. I really thank you for that. Honestly, like huge impact that you've made to what we're trying to achieve. You know as well that we're on a journey right back to something you said right at the beginning. This isn't a destination for us. Like we're not trying to achieve something by X or Y date. I think the thing that we're constantly trying to do that will go on forever, if it's allowed to, is just raise the conversation bar on mental health, get rid of the stigma, because again, like physical health, we all have mental health. I don't know why we don't talk about it. And we have positive and challenging times in mental health, just like we do in physical health. So trying to get rid of the stigma, just trying to talk about it more. And we're trying to give folk out there some real lived experience from people that they can just cling on to, right? So somebody who's, in your case, like unfit, somebody's becoming a new parent, somebody who's thinking about going back to study for the first time, some of the little sound bites that you've been through your own experience, that can be a real powerful thing for somebody who's sitting on the sideline and going, do I not? Like, what was the experience like? Should I? I'm frightened by it. It's all. So that's all we're trying to do. And at the same time, and I think this runs across it, is connect. We think there's a disconnection between society and individuals and a lot of different areas, whether that's environment, whether it's their physical being. I always talk about we're tired, but we just stay up and watch things. Your body's telling you you're tired, right? Go to sleep, right? Or you're really full because you've just eaten a meal and then a cake appears and you go, that's a good idea, I'll eat the cake, right? You stop listening to your body, you're full, right? What are you doing, right? So there's a detachment from physical self, but I think there's also a detachment from mental self. And the app we hope allows you to just take a moment, 30 seconds, a minute, and just think about how you're feeling. So we're early on in the journey. Just wondered what your perception of it was so far. Positive, negative is okay, but just for the listeners, how's the experience been as a user?
Yeah, generally positive. Like
good to hear. I was sweating on that one.
2 years into that. No, good. I think I quite like data. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. When I'm working either with myself or clients, I like to look at things. So where were you 3 months ago, 6 months ago? And with the app, it gives you that. Do you know what I mean? It builds up a pattern. And I think you touched on something before where what was it you mentioned? Yeah, you're looking at sort of insights and stuff into experiences and sharing them. I think what's really important is when you put those experiences into the app, you record them and stuff. I think there's a tendency sometimes to forget about them. Do you know what I mean? When they happen. But with the app, you can actually say, well, no, that did happen. You forget experiences very quickly and maybe how it made you feel or what it was like for you. And then you just brush it off and move on. But with the app, you can actually look back and see what these experiences were. I find that bit particularly useful, particularly towards the end of my degree when I was studying. That was stressful when the baby came along. Yeah, that was very stressful. But then now you probably, it was nothing. But when you actually look back at it and you can actually see how stressful it was and how it did make you feel.
And that's important. And we talk about there's a future feature that's coming, which is we didn't want to give, this might sound bad, but we didn't want to give the ability to the user to edit a moment. And I'll explain. So like you were talking about, you forget how happy or how stressed or whatever other emotion you were feeling, you forget about that feeling because you move on, right? And times change and people come and go and experiences come and go. You forget about the feeling, but in that moment, it's authentic, right? It's genuinely authentic. Yeah. And what we didn't want to do then is 2 days later, a week later, a year later, is for the user to go back to that moment, see the images that they've attached to it, re-explore the emotions and say, actually, no, I didn't feel like that. I felt this way. And because that's changing the authenticity of the moment. Yeah. So what we're hoping to do is give the ability for somebody to layer a second layer of emotion post-reflection onto a moment. And that will give the user an ability to learn how their emotions have changed relating back to the same moment. So I don't know whether you think that would be a good thing or a bad thing. Or
funny, I'm just thinking back to like when you're younger and you've had nights out and you've sent a text in the morning, you're like, delete that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it still happened whether you deleted it or not.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely, exactly.
And now that's I fully support that, to be honest, because and then like you say, when you reflect back, you can compare and contrast
and learn.
And exactly, and say, well, this is what is different, and I'd support that.
Good.
I'd support that.
Good to hear.
How do you find it?
How do I find it? You would expect me to say I'm a little bit frustrated because I want to go faster, right? So I know all the features and functions that we want to embed into the app, and it frustrates me, it stresses me out because there's so much good, I believe, that we can bring and empower the individual, but I can't get there quick enough, and that's an impatient thing, and I think that's something that I'm learning to do, is try and calm down and be more patient about the journey. But I am frustrated because I want to go faster, and I only want to go faster not for my own satisfaction. I want to go faster because I'm really intrigued and hopeful of the positive impact we can make. That's why. So I'm proud.
Yeah, you should be.
But I want to get there quicker, I think.
Yeah. It was great at the launch the other week to see so many people there as well.
Really good, yeah.
Must have felt good after, like I say, it probably felt like a grind at times, a lot of work going into it, a lot of hours, and just to see it finally come together must have been a great feeling.
It was, and a similar thing to the degree, I guess, is you put all that work in, and it's important to stop and reflect.
Yeah, and then so just moving on from that, how was your feeling in terms of like satisfaction? Was it like, right, need to go again, or did you take time to enjoy it? Or
no, I didn't take time to enjoy it, and I should, right? So definitely should. But I got to the end of that, and maybe it's weird to say, and this is I don't want to end on a negative, but I was a little bit deflated at the end because everything up to that point had been about getting there, and once it was done, I was kind of looking over the horizon going, oh God, now what, right? And I know features and functions are coming, but I was like, now we need to focus on the next, and we know what that is, right? It's about taking it to market, but deflated. Isn't that weird?
Yeah, it is not weird, but it's interesting.
It'd be interesting to see so whether we're aligned, and when you get your results, whether you feel differently. Yeah, Stuart, we've got to close there, but I can't thank you enough. I know you've got a big night ahead of you. Thanks for the invite, by the way. Really appreciate.
Do you not get it? It was in I was with you. I went to that freshers party. So really appreciate you coming along. It's been a great conversation. I'm hoping the listeners take something from it. I think we touched on lots of different areas, but yeah, really appreciate it. And thanks guest number 10, right? Double figures. Double 10.
Double 10.
10 for Everton.
10 for don't go there. No, we don't want to go there.
All right.
Yeah, we don't want to go there. Good stuff. Thanks, Stuart.
Thanks,
right,
Paul.
Cheers. Bye.